Hello and welcome to the third Clutter Conversation webcast. Our topic today is preparing to move out, decluttering strategies for moving or staying put. I'm your moderator, Ed Gumnick, and I'm speaking with Gayle Goddard, professional organizer and owner of the Clutter Fairy in Houston, Texas.
Hi, everybody. How are you doing? Thanks for coming today. Really appreciate it. We are going to talk about moving, getting ready for moving because it is the season. It's summer, and between May and August, which is basically when the kids get out of school, as any realtor can tell you, suddenly it's time to move because nobody wants to move in the middle of a school year. So busy summertime of the year, and actually the Clutter Fairy team just did a move from Houston to Austin of a longtime client. We just moved that client to Austin at the beginning of May, and so it certainly is the time of year to talk about moving. And having just had that experience, I think I'm well refreshed on all of the intricacies of moving, and so that's what we're going to talk about today. As I started to do the research for this topic, when you go out and look on the internet for I want checklists about moving and all of the books about moving, there's a million checklists out there, but they all start with the same thing, which is basically 2 months out, you should start sorting and purging your contents. And there's really two pieces of advice buried in that first step, which is, one, you should start 2 months out. Most people run up to the move, and in the last week they think they're going to get it all done in the last week, and really that's just not enough time for you to do it and not kill yourself. When you were 20, you could pack up everything in a day and get it in your car and make one trip and offload it on the other end, and all was well. But if you're any kind of an adult beyond college, packing up in a day or a week is really a chore and much too difficult. So A, you need to start 2 months out, and B, the first step is to sort and purge your contents, which means that you're going to go through and touch everything because you're moving it. You got to go through and touch everything and make sure that you are not going to pack something that you don't really want to have on the other end. And the end result is it's going to save you money if you don't pack it, move it, unpack it. You're going to pay for the boxes to pack it in, and then you get on the other end and you take stuff off to Goodwill. Lots of people think, oh well, I can't make all those decisions, there's too much going on, it's easier if I just pack it all now and then I'll deal with it on the other end. And all you're really doing is saying, I'm going to postpone this sorting and purging process till later, and I'm going to pay somebody to move it, and I'm going to pay for the box to put it in so that I can then give it to Goodwill at the other end. And that seems like an unnecessary expense and more work on your part. You're trading your packing and unpacking time for the decision-making process. So if you can start a couple months out and work on those decisions and try to make them and make your drives off to Goodwill or whatever your charity of choice where you want things donated, maybe it's, take it to your cousin's house, whichever your source is for taking your leftover stuff. If you do that process in advance, you're going to save yourself money and you're going to save yourself pain and suffering on the back end. Okay, a lot of the clients that I work with have, when there'll be some closet somewhere and I'll open it up and here will be 2 or 3 boxes. And basically they're boxes that are left over from the move. So these are ones that came and they got packed and they got shoved in the closet and they never got unpacked, because you get to the end of the move and you're always exhausted, right? Everybody's wiped out by the time the movers leave the house, and then you're faced with the whole task of undoing everything that you just did, and it's really exhausting. So it doesn't surprise me that boxes end up in the closet, basically. But when we go to unpack them, I get these general comments as we go along, like, I thought the mover stole that. That's a good one. Or I will hear, oh, I completely forgot about that. We don't really need that. That Goodwill. Or, oh, we ran out of time. We didn't have time, and so we just put everything into a box and it went in the corner. Those boxes end up with a bunch of I don't have time to think about it stuff, and it ends up in a closet, and 10 years later you're paying somebody to help you unpack it. So all the more reason to say, do your best to sort and purge up front. The next thing on the checklist is packing 1 month out. So if you start 2 months out sorting and purging and getting rid of stuff that you don't want, then another month goes by and then it's time to start packing. You really have to take everything out of every cabinet, every closet, every drawer. You're packing up everything you own. So the last time that I moved like that, where I was packing myself, I rented a pod actually and put a unit on my driveway. And so every night, because I was working full time, this is before I was an organizer, I was working full time. And so I would be at work all day and then I would come home and I would pack a few boxes and go put them in the pods. And how that worked well for me was that I was chipping away at the packing over the course of a month. And then I wasn't completely jamming it all up in the last week and not being able to get it done. And it also meant that I could just pack myself and I didn't really have to have any help until the very end, where I needed a couple of people to help me with some of the big pieces of furniture that I couldn't move by myself. But basically, I spent the month filling the pod. And like I said, I recruited at the last minute for the 3 or 4 pieces of furniture that I just couldn't move myself. And then I was ready to go at the end of the month. The last time that I moved, so I'm older and wiser now, and I paid packers to come and pack. And so they do that at the very end. They come the day before the move, or 2 days before the move, and pack and spend all day long, and the whole team of people packs your whole house all in one day, which is great, but you're paying them by the hour to be there, and they're charging you per box as well. And so in order to reduce your cost, you have to make sure that they're not packing anything that you don't want on the other end. So whether you're going to do it yourself or whether you're going to have the guys come and pack you, basically I spent my 2 months before the guys showed up at the last minute getting rid of things that I didn't want them to pack. So that on the other end, as you're opening boxes, you're not going, oh my God, why is this in a box? Why did I bring this? What is the point of it being here? Whether you're going to do it yourself or whether you're going to pay, there's something to be said for getting rid of stuff that you don't want on the other end. If you're not moving, even if you are moving, you're going to touch everything. But if you're not moving, you can use the concept of moving as a premise for editing your contents in a more strategic manner. Let's just say that. If you're sitting and looking at the contents of a cabinet, the contents of the closet, the contents of a drawer, one of the ways that you can filter for yourself is, if I was moving, would I want to take this with me? Would I want this to show up on the other side? Would I want to be paying somebody to make sure that this thing arrived at the other end well and unbroken? And sometimes filtering through that move filter will allow you to let go of some stuff that you're being wishy-washy about because you're not moving. So it's just a better way to thin the herd, I guess is how I would put it. And it gives you a harsher criteria. It will cost you money to move it. If I was moving, would I be willing to spend the money to get that to the house on the other end? And if the answer is no, it's like, why would I pay movers? Why would I pay packers? Why would I put this in the box? Why would I go to the box store and buy a box to put it in? If the answer to those questions is no, then you can give it away with good feelings about it. Like, okay, I wouldn't move this. I don't need to take this. It needs to go. Just getting organized in general takes a lot of time and effort, but moving really takes a huge amount of time and effort. It is one of those processes that it's really a full-time job. And the job that we just did in Austin, moving is really stressful, and my client was very stressed out as the moving process progressed. She paid for packers, but just watching the packers pack her stuff, she found to be very stressful. There's something about cookie tossing your whole life that really puts moving at the top of the, panic, stress, super stress scale. And all of the things that go with moving, all of the to-do things you have to do, all of the people you have to contact, all of the emails you have to send, all the phone calls you have to make. there's a million things to do to go with the move, and packing your stuff is just a part of it. So it is a very stressful thing to do. If you can start early and purge as you go, you'll be in much better shape when the movers knock on the door. Many years ago, I helped with a move. One of my clients, who's still a client actually, they had to move, and it was very, very important to me that they be ready to go when it was time to move. So we wanted to make sure that they completed all of their packing process, so that when the mover showed up with the moving truck, they were standing around drinking their coffee and had had a good night's sleep and were ready to go. And I think if you're not ready to go, if you're still packing when the movers come and you're still running around the house trying to get everything in a box, you're totally going to mess with the movers' mojo. They pack their truck in a specific order, in a specific way, and it makes the process of driving the truck and having the stuff arrive safely is dependent partially on how they do the truck. And so if you're not ready to go, and I committed this offense as a young person, I have to say, my dad was in the moving business, and as a young person in college, he sent a moving truck over to move me. And of course, when they showed up, I was, just barely dressed and had not finished packing. I still had boxes to go. And so they sort of had to move around me while I finished my packing, and I completely messed them up. And at the end, he sort of said to me, well, if you weren't Bill's daughter, we would have walked away from this job. Like, basically, yeah, you screwed up our ability to do our job. So I learned the hard way. You need to be completely ready to go when those people knock on the front door. And if you're not, you're going to really cause them problems. And, maybe not, some of your stuff may not arrive well and safe on the other end because it's not going to be packed correctly. So luckily I was moving across town. Luckily, they were beholden to my dad, and they still moved me even though they were super mad about it at the time. Clearly I've gotten better at it as time has gone by. So just know that being ready up front requires you getting started early and getting rid of stuff that you don't want to pack, you don't want to unpack on the other end, and making sure that you're complete the night before. If you can aim for getting done in the middle of the day before, that means you can get a good night's sleep and stand up and have coffee and be standing there watching them do what they do. And that will help you to feel better about what they're doing, and you'll be able to say, oh, that's going, that's not going. If you're leaving things behind, we got a few things that went to Austin that weren't supposed to go to Austin. I had to bring them back with me because they got loaded on the truck by mistake. So there's always a few things that get packed that you don't they grab, that you don't necessarily catch them doing it. So watching for that is important. And if you are distracted by packing or doing other things, then it's more of those mistakes are going to get made. So better that you're complete and ready to go. There's a question on here from Michelle. Hi, Michelle. Should you buy new furniture at your destination? Also, should you bring your cleaning supplies? So let me answer the cleaning supply question first, which is most professional moving companies will not take certain cleaning supplies on the truck. And actually, the movers that I use in Austin, they don't want to take liquids of any kind, because if that liquid tips over in some way and leaks, even if it's water, it's going to get water on the box and the contents of the box that it's in and the stuff underneath that box. And he told a story about something tipping over, and it was some kind of cleaning material, cleaning fluid that wasn't toxic and it wasn't flammable, but it was wet, and it tipped over and spilled onto their couch because it's all packed in there together. So they don't take liquid stuff now because they don't want it to accidentally fall over and spill onto the rest of your contents, right? So the rules may be slightly different company to company, but generally flammable stuff, things that are in spray bottles, spray containers that are aerosols, they're not going to take those. They don't want anything that's going to potentially catch fire, and they don't want anything that's going to be toxic or leak or, you know, spill onto your stuff. So expect that those are going to, some portion of your cleaning supplies are going to be rejected. You should take them in your car with you. And then what kinds of things should you actually bring with you? When you move, you mean in the car, Michelle? When you, what should you bring with you in the car? And while you're thinking about that, I'm going to answer the other question. Should you buy new furniture at your destination? Sure, if you feel like it. I mean, I suppose that's a, it depends on how cheap you want your move to be and how much cash flow you have about moving furniture. I mean, if you wanted to sell your furniture in one destination and you were moving across the country and then buy new furniture on the other end, yeah, sure. I think the most important things are you need to be able to live your daily life and get dressed and go to work and do the things that you need to do that way. And you need to be able to stay in touch with people. So you need all of your electronics, and you need to be able to keep up with your keepsakes. Some people still leave that kind of stuff, you know, parked in their parents' garage or their bedroom at home. But basically they're crowding out their parents' space in order to keep their keepsakes. So I would move some of that with you if it was important to you. Diana says, I'm a big toy enthusiast and you collect, okay, I've reached maximum capacity. It's time to start letting go. I still like my collections, and I know the minute I let go, I'm going to see that the toy on their channel or miss it. Okay, so help you downsize your toy collection. So if you've been buying toys for a long time, and this is true for any kind of collection, and actually downsizing that collection before a move is a great thing, because I know packing up my bead collection took a huge amount of boxes. Like I spent a whole day just packing my beads before the packers ever came, because I didn't want them the responsibility of packing that stuff. And you can put a whole lot of time in trying to keep your collection safe and make them and get them to make the move from one place to the other. And that collection, so it's like, what's the best way to ask this question? So the collections can be thinned by how important you think they are, and they can be ranked in order of preference. When you're a new collector, you tend to love everything that's remotely like the collection. And then if it is an old, like if you've been doing it for a really long time, then your instincts are to buy better, more rare, better quality. You start to improve the quality of what you collect, and your early collecting pieces get less important. And so I would look at that, at your collection now, and see if you can rank them according to your preference and let go of some of the less pretty options, less valuable options, less interesting options to you. There's going to be some that are less important than others. And so that's the best way to thin them, I think. I'm trying to think if there's any other advice I want to give about that. If you're in love with it all, but you have a capacity, you have to sort of ask yourself, I have this many square feet, I have this many shelves, I can't collect beyond my storage capacity, my display capacity, and let that be a filter, so that if you want to buy a new one, you have to decide which one is going to go so that you can get a new one. I know that's a hard thing to hear when you're enthusiastic about collecting, but if your house can only hold so many things, and you can only display so many things, if you buy them all and you display them, then you may not be able to show them all, and then what's the point? You bought them, but you're keeping them in a boxes out of sight. It's not the best way to keep it. Yes, Mr. Ed?
Renee Duncan has a question. She says, I'm going to be selling my home very soon and will be using a home stager, which means I need to remove items that I will need to be moved to the new location to remove personalization from the home. Is short-term storage an option?
Okay, so the short answer is, of course, yes, short-term storage is an option, but it does mean that then you will have to go into that short-term storage and pack everything up and move it eventually. So the question really is, the things that you want to keep should go in short-term storage, but don't put anything in there that you really just want to donate. Ultimately, when they're through with the staging and then they can come and move the furniture, or if sometimes stagers provide their own materials and sometimes they use yours. I guess it depends on who the stager is, but if they're using your materials, ultimately a mover's going to have to come and take that stuff, and you're going to have to go to the storage unit and take that stuff. The only hesitation I have about short-term storage is that it becomes long-term, because out of sight, out of mind, right? So you put it out there and then you don't want to be bothered with it and you ignore it, or you go and you take some of the things out to the house that you actually have to have directly. Like, I need this right now, and so you get to the new place and you pull half of the stuff out of storage, but you sort of look at the other stuff and go, oh, I'm not ready for that, and you ignore it, and then pretty soon it's 6 months later and you've never gone back to the storage unit. So I would just be very careful about what you put out there, first of all, and then I would be very cognizant of the fact that it's costing you money to ignore it, and don't forget to go get that stuff back.
Renee said, I've been donating already due to inheriting a bunch of stuff.
Oh, that's good. If you have inherited stuff in the mix as well, that's going to be one of those things. If you get it out of storage for the sale, and it's always hot in the storage unit and you never want to go back. So you just have to be really careful that you don't stick all the stuff in there that you're not ready to deal with, and then you wake up 2 years later and it's all still in there and you've been paying to ignore it.
C. John said, don't see raised hand button, but I have an audio only question. Okay, CJ, I will turn on your microphone.
Thank you for being brave, CJ.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. How are you?
Hey, I want to just say thank you. I've watched all your videos and it's really helped me declutter.
Oh, thank you. That's awesome.
I have kind of a complicated question. How do you plan for the unknown? We know in the upcoming year that there's going to be a lot of changes for us and both our parents. My mom's about to retire. My in-laws are ill. My father-in-law is terminally ill. My mother-in-law has the beginning stages of Alzheimer's. So we know that we're going to all change our living situation soon, and we want to start early, like you've said, to prepare.
Yes, yes.
But it's difficult when we don't know what our future housing situation would be. We all live spread out across the country, and we don't know if we're going to try and get closer so that we can be there to help both our parents. And
so you're not really sure whether you're going to actually leave your own house, or you think you are going to leave, you just don't know in what way or when.
Exactly. And what future destination will be, what size, are we moving into a bigger situation or a smaller situation? How can I help them and also help myself to get ready? I've already used your videos to downsize the stuff we know we don't need, but
that's awesome.
We don't know what we're going to need.
On the other end,
how do we start preparing?
So one thing is to look at the categories of stuff in your house. Like, for instance, go look in the garage and say, here's a bunch of tools, here's a bunch of yard tools, and we're not going to have time to do the yard. We're going to have to hire somebody to do the yard on the other end because we're going to be taking care of mom and dad. Here's a bunch of winter clothes, and we know that our parents live, what part of the country they live in, the parents?
My mom lives in Southern California, and my husband's parents live in Chicago.
Oh, so you don't,
so I don't know what type of weather to prepare for.
Yeah, I see. You're
going to be in California. It's kind of hard to figure out.
Right, exactly. So the idea is you might move to either part of the country at this point. That's still up in the air.
Yes. Or even to a completely new location if that comes up.
Right, a third place. Okay. So you do still have some parameters to tighten down first. So I think in the meantime, The less is better, no matter what. The less you have to deal with, the better. And it sounds like you're at this stage of life where you have kids, maybe.
Not kids.
Okay, that's good. All right, that's helpful. But you have parents that are going to, you know, they're aging and they're ill and they're going to require care, and then you're going to be inheriting their stuff.
Correct.
So I think in the meantime, while you're waiting to determine which location you're going to be in, I would continue to thin your stuff based on, yeah, I have 15 of these and I can really only use 5. You know, look at the places where you have large collections of stuff and don't get rid of them 100%, but shrink it. Go through all the coats, for instance, in case you're going to go to Chicago, but make sure you've gotten rid of everything that doesn't fit, for instance. Don't save a bunch of sizes below or above where you are now. And so just thin the large collections so that there's less quantity. But then I would also spend time while your parents are alive, and you know, they're not going to die simultaneously. So somebody's going to die and the other one is going to be in extreme grief and suffering, and they're not going to be able to manage the contents of the house themselves. They're going to have a hard time, like every surviving spouse does. What do I do with the deceased spouse clothing? What do I do with their stuff? Oh my God, I can't face this. They go through all of the things that happen when your lifetime companion has gone and what you have to deal with. And so anything that you can do to help them corral the contents, thin them out, clear them up, make easier paths for them to move around in the house, anything that you can do to make their house more manageable and livable as caretakers come in, as they have to have a medical device support. You know, somebody ends up in a wheelchair, somebody has to have a walker, somebody has to have an oxygen tank. All of those things change the ability to move around in the house freely. So anything that you can do at their end to help them get ready for those eventualities while everybody's still alive so that no one's in crippling grief will make it easier for everybody on the back end. Agreeing to take things to Goodwill on their behalf, helping them sort stuff, talking to them about their keepsakes, going through the photographs with them, and dispersing those things now. Oh, we really want to, Mom and Dad, we really love these photographs. We really want to take the photographs. Whether you do or not is a moot point. But I think it's important to let them tell their stories about their photos while everybody's happy and generally well. And particularly if somebody has Alzheimer's and they're starting to lose some of that information, you know, dealing with it now rather than later will make it easier on everybody. I'm sorry that you're having to face this, and I guess this is one of the, you know, passages of adulthood is that we start to deal with our ailing parents, and it's very sad and hard, but it is a big project to take somebody's life and their whole house and their whole contents and maneuver it around as people get ill and people pass and people have to be downsized and that kind of stuff. And you may find that if they've been in their home for a long time, there's a huge amount of stuff to do. And you're working and your husband's working and your siblings are all working and, you know, they all have families, and there's a lot of competition for your attention. And so anything that you can do now makes it easier for you later as well as for them later. Does that answer your question?
That helps. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Kind of big.
I know, right? It is big.
Gayle Diana says, I'm definitely ready to let go. At this point, I value the space over too many things.
So Diana was the person asking about the collection. So there's how you set your parameters then. you have the space that is designated for collections, and when the collections fill the space, if you want to add to it, you have to decide which one has to go. And truthfully, if you have enthusiasm about these collections, it's like, you can think of it this way: you're going to own that toy for a little while and love it and think it's special, and then when you see another one that you think is cooler and better, you can pass the original toy on to let some other collector love it for a while, and you get a new and exciting one to play with. And so just think of it as, you know, you're passing them around. You're sharing them amongst the collectors, and you know, you get to hold it and play with it for a time and admire it, and then you get to send it on to make somebody else's life exciting and happy.
Michelle asks, how do you make decisions now? How can someone overcome the "I'll worry about it later"? Have you ever struggled with decisions?
Oh, yes, I have struggled with decisions. When my mother passed away in December of 2014, it was a surprise. It was sudden, and we had, you know, there was no precipitating illness. She was fine, and she was gone in about 6 hours, and it was a big shock for everybody. And if I had had my preference, I would have waited a year to deal with the contents of my mother's house. She lived in North Carolina, and so does my sister. But my sister was the executrix of the estate, and because of proximity, basically, and she found it very, very stressful to worry about all the things that she had to do as part of the handling the estate. And emptying and selling the house was one of those things that felt like a huge burden and bother and stressor for her. So she immediately wanted, like, after the funeral in January, she was like, okay, so when are we going to start emptying the house? And I was like, wait, no. So we each had, you know, she wanted to do it right now, I wanted to do it next year, and so we had to compromise, and I went in the middle. So I went back in May and did it in May. And what that meant was, as I went through the house and was trying to make decisions, it was still very fresh for me, and I had a really hard time. I would work on something for 30 minutes, and then I could sort of be a professional organizer for about 30 minutes, and then it would just completely overwhelm me, and I would have to walk away and go do something else. So I have experienced the struggle of this makes me sad, this makes me cry, I can't deal with this. And I took my own advice in that I worked on something as long as I could, and when I couldn't look at that stuff anymore, I stopped and went to another place. And it meant that it was not the most efficient emptying of a house. Like, if I had been a completely neutral party and had gone into my mother's house, it would have been emptied in a much faster, different way. But I was not a neutral party. I was, of course, a very involved party. And so I did it as best I could, and that was certainly good enough. And the house got emptied. I was there for about 11 days, and we did manage to get it sorted and boxed, and, you know, stuff shipped to me, and my sister took stuff out to her house. And so that was the third part of the question. The first part of the question was, how do you focus on it now? So usually people put it off because they're feeling really overwhelmed. That response of, oh, I'll deal with that later, I'll just deal with that later, is usually the, oh my God, I don't know what to do, this is too big, there's too much going on, I don't know how to make a decision, panic, shut down. And the short, fast thing is ignore it and walk away. So you have to recognize that you're sort of having an overwhelm moment. And if you are overwhelmed by contemplating what you're looking at, then I would try to go to a smaller, so if you're looking at a room and getting overwhelmed, then go look at a closet. If the closet's too big, go look at a drawer. Go look at the top of a table. You can step down to the smaller bite until it's one that isn't overwhelming and allows you to make some decisions and move on. And sometimes it's a matter of not trying to stay at it for 8 hours in a row, and also not doing it when you're tired or hungry or sleepy. because you're having to use, it's an executive brain function to be making decisions. Like you have to have good fuel and good rest and good attention to do it. And so you don't want to be trying to make those decisions when you're overly tired and you haven't had breakfast yet and, you know, that kind of stuff. So consider that you need to be in good shape when you try to do it. That will help you make decisions. And then don't go longer than your body can take, because then your decisions just sort of slide off the cliff. The more tired you get and the more stressed out you get, the harder the decisions get, and the less you're willing to make good decisions. You start, it's not angry, not hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. Exactly. And this also speaks to why you don't want to do any kind of move prep a week out from the move, because then you have to do it nonstop. You have to do it 16 hours a day to get ready. And the stuff that you're doing at 2 o'clock in the morning is not the best you coming to the table at that point, right? So you really, that's part of why you start 2 months out. I actually had a client couple who were downsizing from their home of 35 years, and they were moving into an independent living facility. And so they were getting like a third of the square footage they had in their house. And of course, they had just been packing things into their house for decades. And when it was time to move, they called me like 15 months before their move was scheduled. And thank goodness, because I would go over and work with them for 3 hours and then they would be completely wiped out. And so then my car would be full of things going to Goodwill, and I would go away and I would come back 3 weeks later and do it again. And so we were able to make our way around the house in 3-hour increments, and me taking something out every 3 weeks, taking a completely stuffed carload of stuff away to Goodwill, so that when the packers came for them, they were packing a third of what the people had owned when we started. And when we unpacked it on the other end, we didn't have a huge amount of stuff. It's like, we don't have any place to put this stuff. It makes a difference if you recognize that you don't have infinite capacity to prepare for a move or infinite capacity to make good decisions. And you work with the amount of time and energy that you have and start early enough so that as you approach your move date or just go through your contents, you're going to make good headway because you've given yourself enough time to work, I guess is what I'm saying.
Gayle, Brandon says, I am a sentimental person and am holding on to possessions because they bring me joy to have a physical reminder of my life. Any tips for dealing with sentimental possessions?
Yes, that's everybody's hardest thing, first of all. Let me say that. And the thing about sentimental things is, well, here's a perfect example. As I was going through my mother's house, there were all these pieces of paper with her handwriting on them. And when I would see her handwriting, I'd be, oh, that's Mother's handwriting. It was hard to see her physical handwriting. But I didn't want to keep all the little lists of grocery lists that she had made and the notes, her to-do lists and whatever. Those weren't as important to me, even though the handwriting was touching to me, as other things like when she had written me cards and she had written into the card and signed the card. So sentimental things can usually be filtered in volume, even if for a quality. So if you have a whole bunch of things that talk about your life, for instance, maybe you can look at the 15 things you have that represent that time when you work for that company, and you can pick the representative sample that is the best representative of that time period in your life. With photographs, for instance, maybe you have pictures of a summer vacation and you've got 40 pictures. You probably don't actually need all 40 of them to remember the event. You can pick 10 of those pictures and pick the 10 best pictures, the ones with the most emotional bang for the buck, the ones that give you the most juice and the most emotional response, and keep those, and then let the ones that have a lesser emotional response go. So you're still keeping more of your sentimental value per photo, even though you're not keeping 100% of the photos. That's just an example. But the idea is, although you're sentimental, some of them are going to trigger more response and some of them are going to trigger lesser response. And you can still have a rich sentimental remembrance and value to you if you let the lesser response items go, because you've still kept the really juicy ones. And that's what I try to tell people about sentimental stuff. Yes, you can keep everything, but then you start to surrender living space for keeping them. And so better that you compare them A to B and make choices about what's the bigger, juicier ones and let the lesser ones go.
I think that's also where your suggestion about taking photos can come into play. Particularly if you have sentimental things that are taking up a lot of room and they're not functional or useful pieces, you want to remember it, but you don't necessarily have to have it right there in front of you.
Oh, exactly.
So a photograph or
take a picture of the item as the memory instead of keeping the item.
When you were helping me move out of my house, I know there were several pieces that I had been carrying around for decades for sentimental reasons, and just the act of showing them to you and telling you the stories about them seemed like enough for me. So I think I
remember that needlepoint piece.
Yeah, and the little ceramic cup from Mexico.
Yeah.
And I think just if you're a journaler or any kind of writer, you can take some time and write about the things that deeply affect you, and then maybe let the things go or give them away to someone else, give them to another family member that they mean something to.
But having that picture in place of the 3D object is really good advice. I do tell people that a lot.
Catherine says, suppose you're moving to a bigger place. Do the downsizing principles still apply?
Well, in terms of the cost of the move, yes. I mean, when you go to a new place and it's bigger, then you're just going to spread your contents out more, but you don't absolutely have to pay to move things that you don't really want. You might as well start out with a sparser apartment if you're going a sparser living environment. If you're going to live there for a while, you'll have plenty of time to add things, right? You'll be able to, go shopping and buy things over time. And the longer that you live there, the more things you will add for sure. So I would still thin the herd, take the opportunity of touching everything that you own, which no one makes you do except when you move, right? You don't have to touch everything unless you're moving. So take that opportunity to let go of things that you don't want. And then you're just making space for things that you would love to have.
Betty says, I'm moving out of state, Arkansas, after 39 years in Houston.
Ooh.
Find myself going through stuff, reminiscing, old photos, doing the purging and donating now. Movers will be here July 18th. In between, renting short-term storage unit in Arkansas. This revisiting of the past is hard and quite time-consuming.
Right, and it deserves your attention, which is great that you've started this far out. I have to tell you, congratulations that you're already doing that work. It will be hard it's always hard to touch everything you own, but it's especially hard to go through your old keepsake pile, right? But it's also a good time to touch those keepsakes and decide, okay, some of these, I don't even remember why I kept them. You're going to find things you'll be like, why is this here? Well, I don't remember that person. Like, you got a card from somebody and that was somebody that you were working with and you're not in touch with them anymore. And, there may be things that you can let go of, first of all. And then second, there may be things that you look at now and think, I need to explain this to my children. I need my kids to know that this is artwork that I did in school, or this is, Uncle Bob's la 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 la, right? You have a certain set of knowledge in your head about those keepsakes that whoever ends up with those keepsakes after you're gone will not have. And so while you're reminiscing and going through any kind of note taking that you can do, or if you want to take the objects and pass them on to someone in your life and explain to them about the object, you know, that will be really helpful for them as well, because once you're gone, all of your knowledge is gone too. So good for you, you're starting early. And yes, it is you know, draining to go through and revisit, but I'm proud of you that you're doing it so early, because then you get to actually have the experience and look at them all and remember them and remember why you saved them, and or realize that you don't remember why you saved them and you can let them go, so you can simultaneously revisit your life and lighten up your life. And so good for you. Yay. I'm proud.
Noel says, my son cleaned out his house and took video of every item and tossed them all, 4 carloads. He knows he'll probably never look at the video again, but he knows there is a record. That's brave.
That's very well. You know what? I have never thought, you know, because some people do that now with their contents for their insurance purposes, like they go and video their house. Like, what a great idea to have a video. I mean, now there's so many ways you can do it with the. You can take your iPad and walk around and, you know, get a recording, a digital recording of what was there. And what a great idea. Tell him I said kudos to him. I like that idea, and I'm proud of him that he got rid of 4 carloads too. That's awesome.
Okay, this is the last one we have time for because it's about time to wrap up.
Okay.
Betty says, since moving away from some family members' desire to find, scan certain photos, result, all new pics I had never seen in my life. Desire to share with other family members across country, especially since people have passed.
So you went through and we were looking at everything and you found all these great photos to share. That's awesome. And what's great about digital photos now is that you don't have to print them and send them copies. And I just say that because there's always one sibling that ends up with everybody else's stuff when they're in their 80s, right? So the parents pass away, and before they pass away, they make all their copies and they send copies. I said this last week, they send copies out to everybody, and then all of those siblings die and it all ends up in the last sibling standing's garage. So better that you're scanning them and sharing them digitally so that somebody doesn't have to manage a million copies of stuff that you've shared. But it's great that, you know, it's fun to go back and look at stuff that's 40 years later and, oh, I didn't remember that party, or, oh, my parents didn't have that picture from that party. And, you know, it's so lovely that you've been doing that. That's awesome. And they'll be happy to have them. You guys have been so great to chat with me today. I really appreciate it. If you have any more questions about it, feel free to come. We're going to take this video and post it online later. And so you can go back to that video and post any more questions you have. And you would be, we'll watch for it and we'll answer them.
We want to tell everybody that we're working on plans for the next several Clutter Conversation events. We will post those. We'll probably do another video announcement, and we'll certainly put them on the website at clutterfairyhouston.com, on our Facebook page, which is facebook.com/theclutterfairy. You can also go to our website and join our mailing list. If you're watching a recording of this webcast on YouTube and you'd like to participate in the next event, visit our website at clutterfairyhouston.com.
Oh, one more thing. We're going to do a live in-person one again in July. So we'll have another recording coming up then that won't be an online event, but it'll be a live in-person event, and we'll just post the recording. That won't happen until July.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.